is a huge honor to bring back my homie Lorraine Guth, GuthDentalConsulting.com. Your podcast was so well received the first time. I wanted to bring you back for another round. I've always been in love the most with consultants from the Midwest. I'm from Kansas. It just seems like when you hear consultants from, Kansas, Missouri, Louisiana, Ohio, it just seems to work. And a lot of times you hear a bunch of fancy stuff that works in rich areas or Manhattan, I always think it's funny when I meet a dentist overseas and they say, I went to America. And I say, really, where'd you go? And they go, I went to the Greater New York Dental Meeting. I'm like, did you ever leave Manhattan? And they go, no. And I'm like thinking, really? That's America, Manhattan. Okay. Hey, Lorraine, I'm a big fan of your website, GuthDentalConsulting.com. That's Guth. That's Swedish, right?
It's German.
Oh, I thought one of the reasons you lectured in Sweden because you were Swedish.
No, actually I lectured in Sweden because I was asked to, which was an honor. But I married a stubborn man who's German.
Yeah.
And that's where I got that name. It's not because I'm stubborn.
So let's read your bio. Lorraine's background. By the way, go back and listen to her first podcast. That's the neatest thing I love about these podcasts. When I look at the data, every single day, every single podcast gets more views on iTunes, Dentaltown, YouTube, Google Plus. It's so cool. So go back. You can find it on anywhere. Go back and listen to her first round. Lorraine's background includes many years of business administration and successful treatment presentation, as well as extensive studies in communication and leadership styles. In the last 8 years as a practice management speaker, Lorraine has enjoyed learning and laughing with thousands of dental professionals across the U.S., in Canada, and Sweden. Her presentations are known for offering easy implemented, simple solutions for enhancing the new patient call, treatment presentations, and systems implementation. One of Lorraine's specialties is assisting business owners in managing difficult or conflictual conversations with team members and patients. Recently, one attendee was thrilled when she was able to go back to the office and the next week convert a patient to schedule and complete a case, including multiple crowns, even though her practice did not participate with the patient's insurance company. So it's Guth, Guth, dentalconsulting.com. And you talk about things like, are you maximizing the opportunity to build your business every time your phone rings or a client walks through your door? Are you having difficulty getting your clients to accept your treatment recommendations? Is the way you're running your dental practice keeping your patients from accepting your treatment recommendations or remaining in your practice? Are issues with your staff management keeping you from giving your patients the best possible care? I've gotten 4 iPhone texts this morning, and all 4 texts were from my homies cringing over how their labor costs have creeped up to like 30%. And Lorraine, I know I shouldn't tell everybody we're the same age, even though you look like you could be my daughter, but it was a hell of a lot easier to have labor costs at under 25% when I got out of school in 1987 than in 2016. I don't know if you want to start with that question, but do you mind me starting with that question?
I'm great with starting with that question.
So Lorraine, if I lined up 100 dentists against the wall and said, what keeps you up at night the most? They go, God dang, it's labor. I mean, every time this earth goes around the sun, everybody wants another dollar. They tell me to hang on to my staff because we sell trust. I mean, no one knows if they need a filling or a crown or a root canal, but they find faith that you've had your same assistant for 30 years, in my case, Jan for 30 years. But every time the earth goes around the sun, everybody gives their staff a raise, and you keep doing that. Next thing you know, you got labor costs of north of 30%. What do you have clients complaining about that to you?
I don't know if I'd call it complaining as much as fear. So there's a lot of fear wrapped into how we manage wage discussions, how we manage that percentage in our practice. It's interesting. Sometimes I think there's a perception out there that dentists don't want to pay their team well. And I don't think that's true at all. I don't know if that's been your experience.
It can be true if everybody's number one financial problem is their staff's paid too much.
Yeah. I think what I see is people want to pay their team well. I mean, people want to feel like they're being equitable. But there are a couple of issues that have thrown things off in recent years. One of them is if we're knee deep in participation, and especially in certain areas of the country, if you're writing off 40 to 50% of your fees, it's really easy to have higher wage costs. Plus, you have to see more patients to produce the same revenue. And that gets very difficult. So you have a team of people who they're working harder sometimes. You have limited funds to pay them. And you're, like, I've talked to people who have said, my supply costs have gone way up over the years. My wage costs have gone up. My building facility costs have gone up. And the fee that I can charge for a crown or a preventative care appointment has virtually stayed the same. So what do we do about that? And so, we've seen this work in the field to become more efficient. In the end, though, there's only so efficient you can become. So I think wages stagnate.
So when I got out of school, 5% of the practices were cash only, and 95% took indemnity. Where I just send you I take my cost, I add a profit, I send you the price, cost plus profit equals price, and you just tell me what percent you're going to pay. That was the only discussion. You're going to pay 100% clean exam and x-rays, 80% root canals, fillings, and 50% for crowns and dentures and partials. Now, 3 decades later, 82% of dentists take PPOs, and the PPO's average fee reduction is 40%. So now they're sending you the 40% reduced price. You're supposed to subtract your profit, and now you're out of a budget. So going from cost plus profit equals price to now price minus profit equals budget, now everybody has labor north of 30%, profit margins generally. Income peaked in 2005 at $219,000 a year per average dentist, and it slides down $4,500 a year. So a decade later, it's dropped $45,000 to $174,000.
Right.
So with all that, I just vomited all that on your lap. Lorraine, what are they supposed to do? They're all PPOs, or labor's 30%, and every single year for the last decade they make less money than the year before. Do you think you should just show up at their office with a shovel, hit the doctor over the back of the head, and bury him behind the dumpster? Is that your go-to strategy at this point?
Well, I think after all that, they deserve a nice burial, not just being put behind the dumpster, don't you think?
You think what?
If after all that, they deserve a nice burial, not just being put behind a dumpster. We should at least
I
get that.
I want to be buried in a Tupperware box because I love Tupperware.
Really?
Yeah, Ryan, will you write that down? Even if you cremate me, put the remains in a little Tupperware. I want a Tupperware. So Lorraine, and then what's funny, Lorraine, is they blame it all on corporate. I'll be in a town.
Yes.
I'll be in a town, and it'll be like 300,000 people, and one corporate office moves in there, and they just they blame it. And I'm like, dude, corporate for the country is not even 12% of the activity. It's PPOs, and they want to blame it on corporate. And I feel sorry for corporate for 2 reasons. Number one, some people are doing it so well, like Heartland and Pacific, and they get tarnished by people who are doing it so bad. And the ones doing it bad, just because the ones doing it bad, they can't even keep their average associate for 1 year. And then the reason that corporate, I think, gets a bad rap is because these older doctors can't sell their practice. So I mean, these guys aren't building brand new de novo stores. They're going in. You can't sell a dental practice that's over $2 million to some kid walking out of school with $350,000 student loans. So the guys selling all their opposite to corporate are loving corporate because it was liquidity. They had someone to sell their practice to. And then the kids coming out of school, everybody out there isn't hiring them, and corporate will. So corporate's providing jobs for all the graduates. And then everybody's mad at corporate. It's like, okay, well, your 70-year-old ADA member is the one who sold corporate his office. The corporate provided a job for your ADA member kid who just graduated an hour ago. But I think the real problem is we've gone from indemnity to PPO.
That is the problem.
So what do you do? I'll shut up. That's the number one complaint I get on my podcast. They email me, howard@dentaltown.com. They say, Howard, shut up and let your guests talk. So I will. Ryan, will you please masking tape my mouth shut right now?
I'll share with you. It's interesting. I'll throw out something. There's an article, and I'm going to talk about suffering in a minute. There's an article written by a man by the name of Mark Manson, markmanson.net, and he talks about the question of your life. I'll send it to you. And it talks about we all want things, and the question becomes, do we want something enough? And his point is everybody wants something enough. They just don't want the suffering. They're not willing to choose the suffering that goes with it. And I think part of where this huge drift to participation came in is when things started to get tough in 2008, 2009, and we didn't, instead of looking at running our business better, instead of marketing, instead of doing some of the things we could have done, people just started to participate. And they did, and then, then you're not paying attention to your numbers, you're just seeing more people. And what happened is it just slowly started to ratchet down the profits. And then all of a sudden you have a whole team of people that depend on you and their families. You have a practice built around a model and a system that it is extremely difficult to manage. And we complain about it. And I think, you talk about the corporate versus solo. I see that debate out there. I think the biggest problem with that debate of is corporate better than solo or solo better or corporate's the bad partner is what it does is it takes responsibility off ourselves as business owners to say, we're responsible for what happens to us. We all have choices. And so if you want to be fee for service, go ahead. Do the work that goes with it though. And I have some people that are great at fee for service, but they work hard. They work hard on service standards. They work hard on marketing. They work hard on what am I doing to drive business to the practice. They work hard on how do our systems function well. They spend time and energy on that. So I think at this day and age, you're going to work hard no matter what you do. You're either going to work hard participating or you're going to work hard fee for service. The difference is, there was a day and a time, and I'm age enhanced. I remember a day and a time where you could come out of dental school, you could build your clinical skills, you could be relatively nice to people. And when you were 50, 55, you could have a business base that stayed pretty consistent and built off just referrals. You really didn't have a lot of competitors in that way. And that's just not the way it is anymore. People get information entirely differently than they used to in the past. If you think about it, I remember a day, you might remember this too, and when you wanted information, you went and bought the newspaper, right? Or you went and searched things out. Or if you wanted a plumber, you looked in the yellow pages. I asked my daughter not long ago, she didn't even know what a yellow pages was. When I told her what it was, she wondered why anybody would want that. It was pretty funny. So, there was a time, in that time that worked, people sought out services from referrals in a much more significant way. But now we have marketing messages coming at us 100 miles an hour all the time, and they're affecting our consumer-based decisions. And so, I look at what's happened with corporate versus solo, with participation versus fee for service. I think more people could be fee for service in some areas, not everywhere, but I think more people could, or have a higher blend of that. But we've got to work better at managing our business. And if you're participating, you have to watch your numbers. You have to watch every detail about them.
How do we watch our numbers when Henry Schein is committed that Dentrix will never be connected to an accounting software so that you'll know your costs? When Patterson is committed to showing up at your office every week trying to sell you stuff, but they refuse to hook it up to QuickBooks Online so you know your cost? How can we watch our numbers when everybody trying to sell us a whole bunch of stuff every single day, year round, won't do what every other franchise on the planet has, which is an accounting software called Quicken. It's in the cloud. It's on a CD-ROM. You can download it. And these dentists, I go in there and I say, okay, you just signed up for a PPO. You got a 40% discount. And they just came in for a cleaning, exam, and bite wings. You have 3 hygienists. Did you make $12 or lose $20? And these are guys that know calculus and physics and trig and geometry, and they don't know. But I go next door to the Waffle House or Long John Silver's. Now you can see where my dietary habits are going. And they know because their cash register has the data. Their staff clocks in and out on a cash register. They know at the end of the day their food cost was 31% and their labor was 18%. And then you go, and so, I could rant about that forever.
Well,
what do we have to do? Just all not pay our supply bill until whoever sold us their software says, I'm going to pay you your bill as soon as this damn software can generate a check. So,
On the other side of it, though, we have this is not everyone, but there are some people in the field that have a predisposition. They don't want to look at the numbers. They just want to look at what lands in their checkbook. And it takes time and energy. And sometimes it's emotionally hard to look at the numbers. But if you step outside of dentistry and business, we really pay attention to that. There are now, there are some software support companies out there. I'm not going to throw names out there, but that you can see your numbers. It costs you every month. You might
Do you
spend
recommend them?
I do.
Who do you recommend? This is Dentistry Uncensored. Throw a name.
Well, two of them that I'm looking at right now are Dental Intel and Sika, and they're different. They're both different, but they link into your system. They show you information. The challenge I see for some people is they don't want to pay for it. Costs money. I'm not going to quote the fees, but it's not that much. And so I look at, they say,
What's Dental Intel a month?
I might misquote this, so I apologize.
That's all right. It's Dentistry Uncensored. You just...
it's somewhere around 500.
Yeah, half a crown.
Right? They're not...
Yeah,
but,
2 MODs.
There's, and I understand the dental software will give some information, but people won't take the time to sort through all the reporting and run it all and look at it. So to me, when you're a dentist, you should be working at your highest return on time investment. So if you can have a system that automatically runs the reports, sends you the information, I've got some clients on Sika, they get a text every day. And beyond a series of other reports that come to them by email, that's HIPAA protected, but they get a text that says how many patients they saw yesterday and what they produced, and how many patients are going to see today and what their scheduled production is. So I think being attentive to your numbers matters. And then, having some understanding of what your overhead cost and your profitability is, and it makes you function better. It's interesting. I'm working with a business strategy coach myself, right? I have coaches, and, my coaches are from business. They're not from dentistry. And he talks a lot about, he said, anybody that's a serious entrepreneur looks at their numbers first every day. So if you don't want to do that, you're not an entrepreneur. You're an independent employee. Do you know what an independent employee is, Howard?
I've never heard of that term, independent employee, but I assume it's someone who has an employee mentality, even though they're the owner.
He talks about this. You have to make a decision. If you decide to have a business, you're going to be one of two things. You're going to be an entrepreneur, or you're going to be an independent employee. And an entrepreneur is somebody that, they're a rainmaker. And what they mean by that is there's somebody that's attentive to what's happening, not just in their own business or their own niche industry, but what's happening in business and technology and industry overall, and thinking about how will that affect the future of my business, and what do I need to be doing in a proactive way to manage that. They're looking at what they call the pipeline, the sales. How many people are we talking to? How many people are thinking about doing business with us? What's happening with our marketing? Are we tracking those numbers? So they're a rainmaker. They make sure that there's going to be rain. They make sure there's going to be revenue coming through the door. They're doing proactive leadership activities with their team and building their team and building their abilities to effectively pursue what I call two main concepts that businesses look at. And it's interesting. I speak at a small business program that is not dental sometimes. And all these small business entrepreneurs that are landscaping companies or retail or whatever they are, they get these two concepts really, really well. And they are that our job is to get more clients and retain more clients. That should be a primary focus in any business. If you want to be
two things again.
Get more clients, retain more clients. For us, it's get more patients and retain more patients. What are we doing every day to do that? And they think about it in the way they function. So for example, I was speaking at this small business event, and this landscaping company came to me at the end of it. And I was talking about some languaging to promote business, that kind of thing. And he said, we've been thinking about this process that they have. I'd call it what we would call a post-op check, right? So after they've done some work and they come back to check to make sure some things are working well. And he said, we've been thinking about what kind of languaging we could put in that process that would create more return loyalty from our existing clients or make them want to refer to us. Can you give me some suggestions? That was his question, which I thought was a brilliant question, but I've never had a dentist come to me and say, I've been thinking about the way we process insurance, and I'd like to know if there's a way we can present the way we do it as a value-added service to our patients so they would want to refer more patients to us. It's that whole philosophy of looking at what are all the tasks that we do, and how, while we're doing those tasks, does that task help us reach our two important initiatives, which is to get more clients and retain more clients. If you do a great job in your practice, you're going to lose 10% of your client base every year. So in our businesses, we need to be watching not just how many new patients we get, what the patterns are, but what's our active patient base. Because, you can, I'm rambling now, I'm doing a Howard, right?
Please rant. But you're not using profanity. Come on, step it up.
Yeah, I know. But if you look at, you can get just even if you like. We talked about the systems that get numbers. Like I can on Sika, I can pull up with the touch of a button the last 5 year and trending by month, by year, the production and collection, the number of new patients, and the active patients. I can put 3 reports in front of me and look at them right next to each other, and I can see trends. And I've been able to say to people, for example, that I know you're happy right now. Like I had somebody I was working with for a few months and we got their production and collection numbers up. So I said, I know you're happy. I know you feel like you're doing well. And that's gone better. We need to really have a more significant conversation about the marketing, which they were not as inclined to do. And I said, the reason for that is your active patients are showing a decline. Your new patients are stagnating. And you're happy because your numbers are up. But and that's happened because your system for treatment presentation has gotten better. But it doesn't matter how good you get. If you continue to show decline in your active patient base, you're going to see a drop in your production and collection. So we don't always look at these things, right? So again, we go back to that. We need to be thinking about how do we implement any activity. How can we do it in such a way that it will get more patients, it will retain more patients? I'll give you an example. A client of mine who's a surgeon, busy surgeon, very timely, very kind person. When I went in to work with him, one of the things that he said he did is he greeted every new patient first in his practice. That every patient in his practice was a welcome and honored guest. This is a very successful, busy practice. And so I said, well, what do you mean? He said, he's the person that walked out to the reception room to greet that patient and bring them back. And I've got to tell you, Howard, I go into practices, sometimes people tell me they do things they don't do. We all have perceptions. So I really wasn't sure whether he did this regularly. They planned it. They had it set up in the huddle. It was beautiful. He walked out to the patient. He greeted the patient, said hello, brought him into the hallway, where in the reception area where you come in the door. His assistant was right there. He introduced the patient to his assistant. He said to the patient, essentially, which would have been, Howard, my name's Lorraine. It's a pleasure to meet you. I just wanted to be the first person to greet you when you came to my office. Thank you for choosing us. This is Jane, my most wonderful assistant. And what Jane's going to do for you is blah, blah, blah. And then Jane took the patient, brought the patient back. That patient, I watched him do that a couple times. Those patients were in love with him at that moment. And his case acceptance was huge. And again, it hits the 2 key points. Get more patients, retain more patients, right? So that you're going to have patient loyalty right now at that point, aren't you? But that patient's going to go out to dinner on Saturday night and they're going to talk about him. And that's important. It's interesting. We try to get referrals. And so we think about, why people refer. And there's a psychology behind the referral process. Do you think people, like when your patients refer you, Howard, do you think they do that because they want to help you or they want to help their friend? If your patient refers their friend to you, are they doing it because they like you or are they doing it because they want to help their friend?
Their friend. Their
friend, right. So if you think about it, so we refer people to other businesses or vendors because we want to help them. We're not talking about it for any other reason. And then the other thing that makes us refer is we have to think about the other party, right? So let's say you're at a meeting you're speaking at, you're in the bar with a bunch of people. And if you were going to refer me, you can't refer me unless you think about me while you're in that bar, correct?
Right.
So I've got to do something interesting, service-oriented enough that you're standing in that bar and somebody's complaining about their practice that you want to say my name. So if I was just average, you're not going to refer me. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So think about what he did in that greeting process. You have a patient who now is at dinner somewhere, and that's interesting enough for them to say, oh my God, you're never going to believe this. I went to the dentist, and here's what this dentist did. And it's a great story. So now here, maybe I'm their friend sitting at dinner thinking, well, gee, the last time I went to my dentist, they didn't look up from the computer when I came in, and I've been going there for 3 years, and the person there can't even greet me by name. And at your dentist, he actually walked out to the reception room to say hello to you? That's amazing. So now think about what that does to patient loyalty. So I look at, there are so many processes that we have in our practices that if we just looked at them from those two principles, how do we do this? How do we perform this activity? And in the way it's viewed by our patients, does it make them want to refer people to us? Does it make them that excited? Or does it make them more inclined to stay with us? And if we thought that way more as a business in a much more intensive way, we wouldn't have to participate with insurance companies so much. That was a long diatribe.
No, and I loved it. That's why I had you back for a second one, and they got to go back and listen to your first one. Ryan, you know what number her first one was? But you mentioned Dental Intel. We did a podcast with Curtis Marshall. It was number 21, and then we did another one, 284, the Weston Lunsford. But here's the deal. I mean, it's $500 a month, and dentists won't spend $500 a month. They won't spend 5% of their revenue on advertising, but they don't blink at signing up for a PPO. That's a 40% reduction.
It's just crazy. It's interesting.
You heard Lorraine's was 236, 336. So Lorraine, you're talking to someone who won't give Dental Intel $500 a month. I assume VJ Sika's is about the same. We need to get him on here, Ryan. We've had Dental Intel twice, but we haven't got VJ on. They won't spend $500 a month on numbers. I flew all the way down to Maryville, New York, and talked to Stan Bergman and Shine, pleading to hook dentures up to soft dent. He paid money to this MBA specialist. She went and surveyed a gazillion dentists, and not one of them wanted the deal. I flew all the way to Minneapolis, St. Paul several times, talked to Pete Frechette, begging him to make Eagle Soft out of Effingham, where Heartland Dental's Rick Workman is, and their 1,000 reps in the field was asking all the dentists. They said they don't want it. And with you, I feel the most sorry for you, because when you tell them if they hired a consultant, they would grow their business and make more money, and they won't. But they'll buy an $80,000 laser, a $100,000 CBCT, a $140,000 CAD cam, which I think are all great things if it's a toy you bought in cash. I mean, boys should have toys, but they buy them as silver bullets, thinking, well, if I buy a laser, my staff labor will come down. I'll get more new patients. I'll be rich if I buy a laser or a CAD cam or a CBCT. And it's just absolutely not a magic bullet. Getting your business in order. In fact, this is Dentistry Uncensored. How much does your program cost? If my homie's listening to you right now and he's sitting on the fence with a CBCT, a laser, a CAD cam, close your eyes and drive off the road right now, and write down Lorraine. What does that cost?
It depends on what we do. So, I know there are companies that they only have a certain specific program. I treatment plan just like the dentist I work for. So it's really a matter of what are the clinical conditions, what are you willing to deal with, what will you work with, and then here's what the fee is. So I have people I come in and I do what I call just one visit light skills training, and sometimes that's anywhere from $6,000 to $9,000, $10,000, depending on how many days we have and how many people we're working on it. Sometimes I work with people for a year, and that could be 35, 40, depending on how many people you have, how intensive it is, how many doctors am I working with treatment planning and skills, how many visits. I'll tell you, I have a lot of people that I work with that I do recalls. And I want to say something about running recalls for consulting for a second. Can I do that?
You can do anything you want. You're Lorraine Guth.
Yeah. This is the only place that's true, Howard. At home, that's not true. So, it's interesting. In dentistry, we take these patients that come to us, and we believe so much in making them well, right? Our goal isn't to do a lot of crowns. Our goal is that our patients have great long-term health, that they can eat and chew and enjoy their life. And so sometimes people are a mess. They come to us, we fix them up, we get everything in great shape, and then we do this really crazy thing. We ask them to come in every 3 months or every 6 months, give us money, and let us poke around and find more problems, even though they don't feel like anything is wrong. Isn't that interesting? And we call that preventative maintenance. And so it's interesting that we do that for our patients. And we know that the patients that we can convince to work with us, to do their home care, to follow through and come in, even if it's not urgent, they spend less and they have a better life. That's the way we should be running our business. Like all of the things you're talking about, looking at numbers, about effective leadership, about thinking about how you manage your team, about thinking before you buy a CT scan or whatever it is, thinking about, do I have the patient base? Can I afford it? Is it the right answer? What problem am I trying to solve, right? We need to apply the same kind of treatment planning and preventative maintenance theories to our business that we hope our patients will live with. So like when I do comprehensive work just like you do comprehensive restorative care. But I have a lot of clients that I do recall work. I have people that call me to schedule a visit, and they are advanced enough in understanding how to make their business well that I've had somebody call me actually say, it's time for a checkup. I think I need you to come back within the next 2 or 3 months. And I asked him, why? What's happening? What do you see? And he said, I can't put my finger on it. I just know it's time. Can we just plan 2 days? Absolutely. And I went in within the first morning, I knew what was going on. And by the end of the second day with the team training, we got a lot of things fixed and taken care of. And he didn't wait till they were in pain. It's just like that patient that gets really much more aware of what's happening in their mouth and they get better. And so then they come into you for their checkup and they say, something doesn't feel right up here on this one tooth on the upper right, but I don't know why, but they're not in pain. And you look at it and you say, yeah, I can take care of it. It's pretty simple. That's what we need to do in our business. And then we're going to get more patients, and then we're going to retain more patients.
Okay, so what if someone just doesn't know if they need you or not? They want to talk to you. They want to, because everybody's got a unique practice. You've never seen their practice before. It's totally unique. It has a dental chair and an assistant. And how can they contact you?
They call me. I spend more time with people before I work with them, and if they decide not to work with me after that, that's fine. I spend time with them. I ask a lot of questions on the phone.
What's your phone number?
My business number is 636-273-9500. My cell is 314-304-3176.
So her business is 636-273-9500. And if you're the Circle K in the bathroom right now, right on the wall, her cell is 314-304-3176. Yeah, and homies, I'm going to beat this horse till it's dead. I mean, the practice management people, you have to demand that they hook up to Quicken Online so you can see your numbers. I mean, you figured out trig and geometry, bud. You're some of the smartest people I know are all my homies. They just don't see the deal. And the second thing is, quit buying silver bullets to fix your practice. Get your house in order. In fact, you know what I used to do with my boys? When one of the exercises I used to do with them is there's a website, Arizona Businesses for Sale. And it was so cool. And, they're all the same. And one of them was cans. He would buy the generic stainless steel cans. And then he would have a printer send the label. Then he had fancy equipment to fill these cans. And he just filled cans for people. And, the business, did about $3 million a year in sales, and he took home $1 million. Just all these nice businesses. And it was such a great exercise showing my boys that business is business. It doesn't matter what you do. You can fill aerosol cans or you can do root canals. But if you went into that aerosol can business, you said, well, this guy used to do $3 million, take home $1 million. Now he's doing $2 million and he's not taking home any money. You wouldn't say, well, he needs a laser. He needs to get a CAD/CAM machine to start making metal cans. You would fix the business. And then when you fix the business and you want a cabin or a jet ski or a laser, go knock yourself out. But, you got to get your house in order first. And it's just so sad that 30 years of doing this, all my millionaire buddies, you talk to any of them, they've had 5 different consultants over their career, and they learned something and made money off each one. And then you take to look at all the ones that the boat is sinking, and they always saved money by going to continuing education by themselves without their staff and never getting a consultant.
I got to tell you, Howard, it's interesting. So, and I have 2 coaches right now for me that I'm working with. So I use coaches all the time. And it's interesting sometimes, like my business strategy coach, I've gone through sessions with him, and I realize after the session or while we're partway through it, if I would have coached someone else to do the same thing, but I can't see it in myself. I need somebody else to see me to take me out of that box, right? And I think what happens is we like to work on making our business better in a way that feels good to us. That's what we like. So when you talk about the dentists that go out and buy the CEREC or the CT scan when they really need something else, and those are great tools, but it's not what they needed at the moment. Part of it is because you're making decisions from your own place. You don't have somebody that's questioning you about that. And then I also look at even the continuing education. So I go to conventions and programs. I listen to speakers and presenters. I bring my business manager. I look at those things. What I feel like when I go to a speaker at a general session, there's that saying, I'm getting a pearl, which is great, but those things are not usually implemented that well. I know when I want to implement, I need to sign up for a program or I need to work with a coach. And that's when you take that information and you make it work very specifically for you. And I know when I'm held accountable, I do a better job. I'll go back to that, are you an entrepreneur or independent employee thing, right? And so that's what my coach talks about, as an independent employee, it means that you allow yourself to think like an employee. And for people that are employees right now listening to this, please don't take this in a negative way. But I can tell you, before I owned a business, the way I thought about problem solving came from that experience. I didn't think in terms of the whole picture because I hadn't lived it. So, when you are functioning as an independent employee, you might think about, for example, in a dental practice, it feels like our business is suffering and I need to get more new patients. And so I've heard that same-day treatment attracts people, and I really like technology, so I'm going to get a CEREC. But what you might not be noticing is that the person that answers the phone at your desk is awful at it, and you haven't given them any training. And beyond that, maybe the physical plant looks dirty, and you're not doing any marketing. So maybe that CEREC is a great toy, but nothing's going to get past the fact that your website isn't even worth looking at. So why should people choose you? Does that make sense?
Yeah. You see the same thing with the CE. I mean, I've told everybody for a million years, you go to any practice management course, half the room, is 150 doctors, all came by themselves to save money. The other half of the room, every row is one dentist with his two hygienists, his two assistants, two receptionists, the spouse. And the dentists that educate the whole team, they're making twice as much money as the ones saving all the money by coming alone and not implementing. Same thing with the consultants. I don't want to say what is the best practice I've ever seen in my life from every category from A to Z, because it always pisses off Jerome Smith when I say his name, and in Lafayette, Louisiana. But, I mean, that guy still has, he's, I don't want to say his age because he'll get mad if I say he's 63, but he's had a consultant like every year his whole career. And so all the top-notch people do that. But if someone asks me, what percent of, how many employees work in the average dental office? I'd say about half. And the reason they don't work is because they're not trained. They don't go to CE. They don't do it. They're not it. They're answering the phone like, hello. I mean, while you're back there trying to find a fourth canal and a molar. It's just, gosh, I just can't say enough things about it. Hey, one of the things on your website, the things you always talk about at Guth Dental Consulting. Do I pronounce that right, Guth?
Yes.
Guth Dental Consulting. What is a needs wants assessment and why spend the time? What do you mean by a needs wants assessment and why spend the time?
Okay. So when a new patient comes to our office, I call the first step that you have with them what I call a needs wants assessment, which is essentially where you're sitting down knee to knee, eye to eye with someone and learning about what brought them here, what do they need, what do they want, why was it important for them to come in, and where you get to be a human being with them first. And so, we do this. Some people do this. Some people don't. Some people do it well. Some people don't. I think we forget there are key moments in any engagement or relationship that will tend to define the relationship. And so, if you look at, I think this is one of those. And I think if you look at people's buying processes, and we have to think we have consumers. We don't have patients. We have the first consumers before they're patients. And so if you look at buying behaviors of consumers, people buy, I think, us in 3 stages. First, they buy you. They buy you as a person, as a human being. Can they feel safe with you? Patients can never have complete informed consent. What they have to do in order to submit to involved care with you, or sometimes even simple care, is believe that you care about them, that you understand the way they think and feel enough to feel safe in your arms. And they make that decision based on all kinds of things that have nothing to do with your dentistry or who you really are even sometimes. So first, they buy you. Second, they make a determination whether you're clinically competent. Are you capable of doing the job? And I think this is in any kind of industry. And again, I don't know if we consciously tick this off, but it's part of the game. So it's like, okay, Howard, I'm coming into your practice. Oh, I think I like you. You seem like you're a good person. And the next thing going through my head is he really good at what he does? How will I know that? And so once I make that correlation that I think you're a good person, I think that you know what you're doing, the detail of the whole process is, what treatment plan do I want? Because I bought you now. Once I buy you, I'm willing to problem solve with you in a completely different way. And we forget this sometimes. And like in some cases I've seen people where they're not attentive to everything happening in the front end of the process. And then when it's time to talk about treatment, we bring them into a really lovely consultation room, and then all of a sudden we put on our charm. And it's just too late at that point, right? So a needs once assessment is the first 5 minutes, 10 minutes that you as a clinician sit down across from somebody, what you do. And you need to be really present. And I'll share with you, it's interesting, there's a gentleman I worked with, and I knew him before I worked in his office. And there's a event that I went to regularly in Pennsylvania, and great person, great guy, really clinically great. And I went and watched him in his practice the first day. And at the end of the first day, I said, "Where did you go? It's like you left the room. I couldn't see you anymore." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You became this sterile doctor. So you need to take a few minutes and first be the guy that all your friends like, for a moment, be with the patient." So needs once assessment allows us to do that. So the first step is just create connection with people. And you don't have to talk for 20 minutes about their dog or their cat. You just be present. Quit worrying about what happened 5 minutes ago. Quit getting ticked off at your team, and quit worrying about the next room you need to go into. And so the other objective of the needs once assessment is, I want to know what brought them in. I want to know what's important about that. And I'm going to define that a little bit. It's not just the question of what brought you in today. There's more to that. So I'll share with you, there's a client of mine I was working with, and it was probably the second or third time I'd been in his office, and he would have his assistant bring the new patient in the room, and she brought the x-rays he would pull the x-rays up and take a look at him before he went in. And so she came in, I was standing there to tell him it was time for him to go in and meet Mrs. Jones. And so he looked at the x-rays and he said, "Okay, what do you want me to say?" And I said, and I just looked at the x-rays, and her mouth was bombed out. And I said, "So why is she here?" And he said, look at the x-rays." I said, "I see those, but why is she here?" And he said, "Because she wants it fixed." And I said, "How do you know?" And he asked the assistant, and he said, "Why is she here?" And she said, "Well, she said she wants to get her mouth fixed, and she's getting married." He said, "See, it's the wedding pictures." See how we jump to conclusions, Howard? And what I said to him is, I don't want you to jump to conclusions, and I don't want you to talk a lot. I want you to go in and ask questions, and I gave him a format. He went in the room, sat down and said hello. He was very graceful with her. And when he got to the "what brought you here," he said, what made you decide, actually what I had him go to is, why is it important now? I got him to where she told him she wanted to get things fixed. And he said, what makes it important now? Is it the wedding? And actually he said, is it the wedding pictures? All right. And, but he stopped because I asked him to, and because I was standing outside the room making sure he stopped, right? And the patient sat there quietly for a minute, and you could see a look on her face. And finally she looked at him and she said, "Well, part of it is the pictures, but my fiance, he used to look like this too, and he got everything fixed. And now we're getting married, and I'm getting ready to get married to this man, and I'm ashamed. and he knows how I feel about it. So he decided he's going to pay for me as a wedding present to get all this fixed. So he was in the room with this person 5 minutes, and she said that. And that was the point that she accepted treatment from him. This is somebody that had not gotten things fixed before, and it wasn't just about her fiance paying for it. It was about this wanting to feel good about herself at the moment that she got married. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you know why I'll never get remarried?
Why?
Because my girlfriend won't leave her husband. I'm just kidding. That is a beautiful story. I mean, people don't always buy for dental reasons. They buy emotionally, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. We use information to back it up, but we buy with emotion. You know, we always think education changes behavior. Like if we tell people enough. And so I think it's not what people know that changes their behavior. I think it's what they think about what they know, right? So it's like, I know donuts are bad for my health. So, but, you know, I might decide today because I was on the elliptical machine long enough that I think it's okay for me to eat that today.
Yeah, I won't do elliptical anymore. It's just I always spill my beer when I'm on that damn thing. You know, a treadmill, if you walk slow enough, you won't spill your beer. I want to ask you a very a different question. You're talking about talking to the patients about treatment. You're finding out why they want it done, all this stuff. There's a huge debate on Dental Town that splits the dentist in half about who talks money. Some people say, well, I can't be loving and considering to my patient Lorraine and then turn around and say, but you got to give me $1,000. Now you sound like you're not loving, caring, you don't have empathy or something. Now you're just a mercenary. Talk about the evil money.
I love money. I love the discussion about money.
But should doctors do it, or should you say, hey, you need 2 crowns. Now I'm going to go get Lucifer's sister up front, and she's going to come back and talk about the fees? Or should you just say she's Satan herself?
Well, you could do that. You know, I don't think there's an exact answer. So I'm going to say one thing though. I think doctors should be good at discussing fees. They should learn how to do it. Whether they do it or not, that's a whole nother question. And the reason it's important is because if they don't learn how to do it, they start wearing what I call the velvet handcuffs, right? So they are now chained. They get one person who's really good at it, and they're completely dependent on them to live. They're afraid if this person isn't there, they're not going to pay their bills. And then when that starts to happen, then you're almost encouraging negative behavior on the part of the employee. I mean, I can tell you I was that employee at one point. I was the one that could fill the schedule. I could make anything happen, and I was young, and I had negative employment behaviors, and I got away with it way too long, and I needed to get in trouble at work to make that stop. So, you know, I think the doctors need to be good at this. And I think when a doctor's good at it, it's easier for you to train and motivate an employee who can do it to be good at it. You know, I used to, sometimes when I teach doctor and team members certain things, you know, I'll say, well, you know, if the doctor can do it, you certainly can do it, right? And so it's interesting. I've seen training on how to talk money and new patient call. When I train both the doctor and the team members, if the doctor can do it well, it sets a whole new standard for the team. So the question is, I think the doctor should do it. If the people you have can't do it well, then the doctor can do it. But you don't go through the financing process. You just quote the fee, and there's a way to do it. My preference in most cases is to have the administrative team member, but I do think it's interesting. And I'll even tell you the story for a moment. I have a perio specialist who will quote the fee in a general way. He's very comfortable with it. He does an excellent job. And I think it gets more case acceptance. And it was interesting because he had a patient that came to him from one of his GPs, a good GP. And the patient asked the dreaded question every periodontist hates, which is, I really like the idea of this treatment, and I think I want to work with you, but I'm not so sure if I want to go back to my general dentist. Right, that's an awful thing for a specialist to hear. You know, that's a bad place to be. And so when she said that, he said, well, you know, Dr. Jones is a great clinician. Why would you not want to go back to him? And she said, I just feel like I'm not sure about his integrity. And he said, really, why? And she said, look, I asked him about the fees, and he acts like he doesn't know. And he has to know. And she said, she worked with significant real estate sales, right? And she said, I have to tell people how much things are. It's not that hard. Why would he not tell me? So it's interesting. We have these impressions that people will view us in a negative way if the doctor quotes fees, but that's not always true. So I just think they should do the financial arrangement. So it depends on the doctor. It depends on the team. If you're not going to learn how to do it well, then get a team of people. Make sure you have more than one. You want 2 or 3 people, depending on the size of your practice, that can really effectively discuss money and fees. And by the way, do you want to know what the most common phrase people use or say right before they buy something that's a large expense and unexpected?
I know exactly what they're going to say. They're going to say, I could have bought a kilo of weed for that much money.
Well, that wasn't
Was that
my
right?
guess, but that
right?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. It's been, that was good. Usually it's...
You did ask. That's your fault. You did ask.
And anybody that wasn't paying attention to the podcast, and it depends on what state you're in, really, whether you could buy the kilo of weed, doesn't it, right now?
Well, I'll tell you what. It's very exciting about Colorado legalizing that, because it's taking a lot of money out of the big corporations in Central and South America that were causing so much corruption on so many levels. And I think legalized weed is going to turn out to be just like alcohol, where 18% of dentists will go to the Betty Ford Center for about 4 months one time in their career. 38% if you're an anesthesiologist. So alcohol, we all know, is a horrible thing when abused. And now that pot's legal, we're going to find out that as soon as this honeymoon's over, we're going to find out that's another horrible thing to get addicted to and all that stuff. But I'd rather have Americans have the horrible side consequences of their problem with addiction than all of Central and South America. And if you look at the cells that Colorado is selling, about every person in Colorado would have to wake up every day and get high in order to buy that much weed. So, that weed's going all over the United States. So I'm just glad it's going from underground to above ground, and America deal with its problem instead of shipping it off overseas. That was a big rant.
That's okay. So the number one phrase people say is, there's no way I can afford this. Or, oh my God, that's expensive. I can't afford that. So it's interesting. That's an emotional reaction. And, we all know when we're in emotion, we don't think as well. We don't process as well. And frankly, if you were in a car dealership and they quoted you the price of the car and you said, oh my God, that's way too much money. There's no way I can afford that. That salesman is not worried about your pocketbook at that point, because they know it's just an emotional reaction. That's all it is. And we say that all the time. It's interesting. I remember one time I was out with a friend of mine and we were looking at purses, shopping. And I saw a purse I really loved, didn't look at the price tag. And I said, oh my gosh, I really like this. I was looking at it, it was $625. I was like, oh my God, there's no way. That's way too much money. And I remember I was holding it. I still remember when this phrase came out of my mouth. I looked at it and went, but the leather is really buttery, isn't it? And then I started talking about all the nice things about the purse. I didn't buy the purse, but I really wanted to. And what I did is, because I liked the idea of it, I was talking myself into the value of the purse. But if somebody in dentistry somebody that was untrained that we put in dentistry, as soon as I would have said, oh, that's way too expensive, there's no way a purse is worth that much, they would have taken me to another area where the purses cost less right away. Does that make sense? So I think for some of us, we hear these emotional responses from people when we talk about money, and I don't think we have to necessarily respond to it. Can I tell you a quick story?
You can tell me a long story.
Oh, I love it.
Followed with a quick story. No.
So one of the people I used to work with years ago, he was a great mentor, and he pushed me out of my comfort zone. And so one of the things he said is that I still remember him saying, Lorraine, people sell a Mercedes quicker than you sell a Crown. And he said, you're scaring my patients. You talk way too much. And he said, and you're worried so much about their money because you equate it to what you make, that you're talking them out of things, and you don't have the right to do that. And I was like, no, I don't. And he said, yes, you do. And he said, so, he said, you're number one, you shouldn't care about their money. And he said, you shouldn't, we don't diagnose treatment from the basis of whether somebody has a lot of money or a little money. Their money is none of our business. And he said, you think you care about people because you care about their money, and that's wrong. It's not fair on either side of the table. And he said, if we're really going to care too much about their money, then we need to become certified financial planners. And we need to really do an extensive investigation into their financial assets to help them make that decision. Does that make sense? Like it was that whole, you're not qualified to do that. That's not what they're coming to you for. They're coming to us to learn what's best for their health. And that's what we're supposed to do. So it was an interesting concept. So he said, I'm going to help you with this. And he said, so he set me up. There was a patient he sent up to the desk. And he told me exactly what I had to say and not say. And then he told me, and I'm going to stand around the corner and help you, Lorraine. Howard, what do you think he meant by that?
Make you do what he said to do.
Yeah, it was like the only way. He said, the only way I'm going to get you to shut up is I'm going to stand around the corner so you know I'm listening to you. And he said, and so you're going to worry about this because you always worry about people's money. So before you do, I want you to know that this man owns a major hotel on the St. Louis skyline. So quit worrying about his money. I was like, okay, great. So the patient came up. I said hello to him, had a warm introduction. And then I reviewed. I said, I understand what you decided that you wanted was you wanted to be able to eat and chew comfortably again. And the way we're going to do that for you is the 15 crowns or whatever it is. I don't remember what it was exactly. And the fee for that, Howard, will only be $15,000. And he told me I had to say only, and I had to smile and look the guy in the eye. And so I did that. And that's when this man looked at me. His eyes got big. And he said, wow, that's expensive. Now, my first thought was, I wanted to say, excuse me, sir, but could you wait just a second because the doctor's helping me around the corner and you didn't respond the way he said you would, so I don't know what to say next. It was kind of funny. But because I had this freedom now, I was following instructions. So I just looked at the gentleman and said, it is. Which I still agree with to this day. If he thinks it's expensive, it's not my job to dispute it. And what I've come to understand is, why does it matter? We all have things we value that are expensive. So why should I debate the point, right? So I just said, it is. And I waited. And this man, you can't see it outside of the podcast, but I remember he looked at me. He looked down. He was quiet. He was tapping the counter. He thought for a minute. And then finally he looked up and he said, Lorraine, I only brought $4,000 today. Can I take care of the remaining $11,000 when I come in for the appointment? I said, absolutely, Mr. Jones. We'll be happy to do that for you. And I scheduled his appointment. So really amazing how, for me, when he said, wow, that's really expensive, that translated into my mind what I would have been thinking, which was, I don't have the money for it. I don't even know how I'd finance it. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I need to find another alternative. I need to find another treatment option. So my mind would have been making judgments for that person, which is wrong. We're not supposed to do that. So it's a really great teaching point. And one of the fun things about it is the doctor and I had been having these debates about he wanted people to pay a retainer before they did comprehensive care, before we scheduled. And I used to say there's no way anybody would ever pay any money towards treatment before it was completed. So because I gave the fee, I didn't say anything, the man handed me money. And I posted the check, and it was the first time I ever took a deposit. So, and actually over time I've learned, I think when we do a large case and we book a large hunk of time, people should have a certain payment that they make at the time they schedule. I call it a time of schedule payment. I don't consider it a prepayment. Because when you agree to that kind of care, we are starting working now. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It's not the day they come in. There's prep work for that. And so when people make some kind of retainer payment or time of schedule payment at the time they schedule a large treatment, it is a commitment to the treatment, and it's really good for the patient psychologically. And the reason it's really good for the patient psychologically is when we have hard things to consider, once we get to the decision point and we quit agonizing over it, we feel better, don't we? It's like that. You go back and forth. You're thinking about buying a house. Do I want the house? Do I not want the house? What about this? What about that? And there's that angst. But the moment you say, okay, let's put the contract down, I want it, we all feel better at that point. And I want patients to have comfort in their care. And so I want to make the money process and the money discussion achieve that comfort. And then they walk out of your office and they feel like they've made a decision. And then they go out to their friends and they start talking about what they're going to do for themselves and they feel good about it. Whereas when people walk out of your office and they're indecisive and they're still in angst, then they go to their friends and say, I don't know, I went to the doctor, I think I might need all this work, oh my gosh, it's going to be $15,000, I don't know what to do, et cetera, et cetera. Now they might be sitting next to somebody that had a bad experience, has no idea what's happening to them, and they talk them out of their health care. And if we care about our patients' health, we want to help them get to a good decision with the right people around them. Does that make sense?
I think several thousand dentists around the world just said, Lorraine, you're absolutely right. I am going to pay for that divorce. It will be absolutely worth it. I think I can hear them nodding their head in Kathmandu saying, Lorraine's right. It is worth every dime. Lorraine, I want to ask you another, can I we hit an hour. Can I go to overtime with you?
Absolutely.
You see this journey that everyone starts out on as they diagnose the one tooth. You come in with all these teeth, and of course the one that looks like it was shot by a rifle is what we need to look at. And then it seems like some get older, some stay there for life. Some get older and they say, well, if I'm going to numb up that quadrant, why don't we do the whole quadrant? And only about 10% in my estimation ever get to the part of the journey where they just diagnose the whole mouth. They always, you're a human, you're Lorraine. I mean, I don't care if you got one cavity in each corner. I mean, this is what you need, and they present the case. How can you coach? And then I also got to say that these podcasts have gotten viral. We've been having some with 33,000 downloads from here to China. But how do you coach someone on that journey to go from one tooth to quadrant to full mouth? Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's a great question. So
You're the first guest that ever said that.
Yeah, I know.
No one's ever said I had a great question.
We have 8 hours to talk about this, right? No, I'm just we're going to do the Cliff Notes. So here's the first step. As a clinician, you have to decide that you're more concerned about your patient's success and health than your own discomfort. Because really talking people through complex care, part of what stops us is we're uncomfortable with the idea that the patient might not like us at the end. And so this is something as a consultant that I face. You know, there are times I have to tell people things like, oh, you might need a forensic audit. You know, there's a risk there. And so, you know, I think when you decide that you care so much about your patients, knowing and understanding the appropriate information to make good decisions for their life, even if some of that discussion process is uncomfortable, you'll start heading more towards comprehensive care. That's one thing. The other thing is you got to give yourself time. And so, you know, with PPO, we put ourselves on roller skates in the hygiene area. And if you think about it, you know, most new patients don't accept treatment right away. I mean, there's some people that come in and they buy the whole thing, but really some people need to get to trust you. So we're not giving enough value to what happens in the hygiene department. And so there are ways to prep and manage that discussion in the hygiene area. But I think really one of the things we need to do is sometimes, if let's say you have a patient, some of these people you talk about, they've been coming every 6 months for 5 years. You know them, you look at them in the morning huddle, and you say, oh, there's Mr. Jones, never wants to do anything. And so I think I look at, you take that person, you walk into that exam that day, and your hygienist prepares the patient. And so instead of trying to do another 5-minute exam and convincing them to do something comprehensively, you sit them up in the chair and say, Mr. Jones, I know when you come in, you and we pretty much have this short discussion regarding what's happening in your mouth. I'd like to ask you if you'd consider doing this a little bit differently today. And so I'm seeing your mouth changes, your body changes, and we're starting to see some things happen. And I'd really like to ask you to come back and sit with me for a good 30 minutes. and it's complimentary. I'll give you my time. But if you're going to work with me as a clinician through your life, I want at the end of that time that you look back and say you were happy with what those choices gave you. And so I'd like us to sit down, really take a look at what's happening, and have you think through all the choices you're making so that whatever you decide, when you look at it 20 years later, you're happy. Would you be willing to do that? And as soon as they say yes, then I'd say, great. The first thing I'm going to need are more comprehensive diagnostics. And then I'd say, Jane, I'd like you to get blah, 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 blah. And then I'd say, I'm going to have Jane get some more comprehensive diagnostics. She'll talk to you about that. There will be a fee for some of that, but the additional time I give you that's just complimentary for you. So if in every practice, we took one hygiene patient a week, and we did that, and we had them come back for a consult. So that's 4, on an average month, that's 4 people. So out of that, we're going to have one person that might make better decisions. And the other people are farther along in their information. I mean, we think, I think doctors worry about overwhelming people, but the other side of this is sometimes that you have people who complain, and I used to hear this at the desk sometimes, why is it every time I come in, he finds another tooth that needs a crown? And the answer is, oh, you needed that crown 3 years ago. He was just afraid to tell you. And so, I think we need to tell people what they need. We need to be good at giving bad news. I think it's not always the level of treatment that overwhelms people. It's that our dialogue overwhelms them. There's, Howard, you have a cell phone, right?
Yep.
So on your cell phone, do you ever notice you pick up your cell phone and you look at how much battery you have?
Yes.
Yes, right? So I think about it. Patients have listening batteries. So just like you have that little battery on the phone, when we walk into a patient, when I go into work with a team, I literally visualize those little listening batteries on everybody's head. And when they walk in your office, it's not at 100%. All right? So if you go in and you talk to a patient, let's say a new patient, and they're in the office and you're talk for 60 minutes, their battery's gone. And when you get tired of listening and you need to be polite, what do, Howard?
Start daydreaming about something else?
Yeah. And nod pleasantly, don't you? Especially men. When men get tired of listening and they're not interested, they nod, right? So I think we all have listening batteries. And so part of us getting people through this discussion is by using a lot more questions, giving less information. There are ways to go about the process, and the patient's really engaged. So, the other side of it, like when you want that battery on your cell phone to be stronger, right? You plug it into the wall, you give it some electricity. Well, when people are tired of listening, the way to re-engage them is to make them talk. That's how it works. So when you're using questions and you're getting them to engage, it makes a difference. There's a formula I use. I call it SSS, P, or Q. It's short, simple statements, pause, or question. And then there is a number behind it, 3-5. So it's short, simple statement, pause, or question. If you're speaking more than 5 sentences in a row, they are drifting off. I mean, think about it. I'll just put you on the spot. If you've had a long day, you're tired, you don't feel like listening to anybody, and one of your team members comes in the room, and they're talking and talking and talking, and you can't offend them. How many sentences do you really listen to before you drift off?
Right. Not very many.
I hear anywhere from 1 to 3, 5 on a good day. So if you're talking complex, segment it up, give a few sentences, get them engaged. So as an example, if you needed a crown, you never had a crown before. Before I tell you need a crown, I might say, what do you know about crowns? What have you heard? I might ask the question, If somebody's had one before, sometimes you ask that. I've asked that. Or I've said, like as an example, let's say they have an MODBL, STXUYZ amalgam, with the margins open and overhang and blood and pus and all that other stuff, right? And so you talk to them about what's happening with that tooth. And so then you just say, so that filling isn't going to work anymore. And just get quiet. And now the patient will talk to you. What do you think they might say?
Oh, what are you going to do?
Well, what do you know about a crown? Have you ever heard of a crown? And so now they're talking to me. They might say, oh, my neighbor had one of those, and they said blah, blah, blah. So now I know what kind of information to give them. Or they might say, oh, just depending on what they say, I know how to give information now. That's why I like that formula. And so there are lots of ways to apply it, but you need to use questions more to give information.
Can I ask you to answer one last question? When you tell them about a crown, they say, what do you say? They say, well, just do whatever my insurance will pay. Just do whatever the insurance says. I mean, I hear that a lot in Phoenix. I mean, I'm not in Scottsdale. I'm not in Paradise Valley. I'm not in, Key Biscayne. I'm in Phoenix. 25% of my patients speak Spanish as their primary language. What do you say to patients when they say, well, I just want to do what the insurance will cover?
So now I don't have what part of how I would respond to that is related to the discussion prior, but just as an example, my first response would be, is there a reason you're choosing to do it that way? Like, ask them. Is there a reason why? So their answer is going to lead me to the next answer. And, if they say, well, I just really need to keep the cost down, right? That might be one. So I might say, well, I appreciate that. And when you think about that, are you looking for a solution that's less expensive now, even though it'll cost you more and you'll have to redo it later? Or when you think about saving, minimizing cost, would you prefer to have a solution that costs maybe a little bit more now, but you're not going to have to fix it all the time and it's going to cost you less over your lifetime? Which of those two ways would you like to save money, Howard?
If I told you what I tell men who don't want to get 3-month recalls, you probably wouldn't believe that I say it.
What?
They say, well, you said I'm supposed to get my teeth cleaned every 3 months, but the insurance will only pay every 6 months. And I said, well, what if you wanted to not have any more kids and you wanted a vasectomy and the insurance would only pay for a castration? I mean, if you want to get your nuts cut off from Delta Dental and Blue Cross and Blue Shield, knock yourself out. But I'll tell you, at age 65, none of my hygienists wear dentures, but 10% of America does. And at age 75, none of the hygienists wear dentures, but 20% of Americans do. So if you want to get your nuts cut off and wear dentures, go for it. I don't care. I do. That's what I say.
Howard, it would get people's attention.
But I think the world of you, Lorraine. I just think you're real world, down to earth. Everybody I know that knows you or uses you or whatever just loves you to death. Her cell is 314-304-3176. Her email is Lorraine, Lorraine at guthdental.com, Guth dentalconsulting.com. Go to her website. It's just fun stuff to read. All my homies love her. Lorraine, thank you so much for spending your Friday afternoon with me. We should have had drinks or beers or something.
Oh, we will someday. Can I throw in one last moment?
Yeah.
Everybody remembers the last thing. A great question to remember when a patient's fussing about fee. Does knowing the fee change the result that you want?